So welcome everyone to another FOIA Friday, whether you are here for the first time or you've been here many times. You're in for a special treat today. AJ Johnson, who is maybe next to me in your Zoom view, is going to talk today about her work as an information professional. She's worked for the government and nonprofits. She's worked for the GAO and is now a citizen and community reporter for Documenters in Detroit, which is a really awesome initiative that I think she's going to talk a little bit about. So she's going to tell you all about that and her journey in FOIA and filing requests to the Detroit PD. But before we get to that, I'm going to kick us off with a mailbag edition of FOIA Friday. I'm going to go through I think 7 questions that I've gotten in the last 2 months, 3 months that have come in, and I think they're really great questions for the whole group. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and go through this document that you are probably used to seeing now if you've been to a couple FOIA Fridays. This is just the tip sheet for the call today. All the links and resources are here that should be in the chat if you're looking for it. If not, someone who has recently arrived or has the link, can you drop it in the chat for the rest of the folks? Um, yeah, like I said, today we are going to go through the mailbag, and then AJ Johnson is going to present on public records, Detroit PD, and Detroit documenters. It's going to be really exciting, so I'm glad that you are all here to see that. Um, yeah, let's see. If you are new here, you can drop your name in the roll call. It's just there for anyone to put themselves in and say a little bit maybe about what you're working on or what you're interested in, so other people can find you or share interests or say, hey, I'm requesting the same thing, or I work in the same state, or I'm interested in the same area of public records. Um, but that is not mandatory by any means. If you scroll down, you'll see the topic of the week, which will be our mailbag questions, and lots of links and answers there to questions that we've gotten. And then we have room for announcements if you want to drop anything there or brag about any cool thing you've done. And then again, at the bottom, we have lots more resources for you to dig into. These are kind of the evergreen resources that I feel like have come up in our calls, whether it's about appeals, or where to find legal support, or tactics to follow when you don't get the records. That's all there. So yeah, without further ado, because I want to make sure we have time for AJ's presentation, I'm going to dig right into the mailbag questions. You can submit a question for me and the Muckrock team to take a look at by using our session feedback form. You can also just tell us how FOIA Fridays are going, if they're fun or interesting to you. If they're not, tell us why not. Any and all feedback is helpful, and the questions you submit there, I'll try to get to at a steady pace in calls, or if it's been a while and I have a mailbag that is piling up with good questions, I'll do another call like this where I go through as many as I can. So to start off, let's see what we got here. Oops, trying to pull up the chat at the same time. Um, there we go. So first question is not a question. Someone submitted and said, no ideas, just wanted to get started with FOIA. I'm sure a lot of people in this call could point that person to places to get started. I had a few ideas. We published a couple weeks ago a guide on requests that you can file about the presidential transition. These are all the documents that are created during a transition. And we gave folks 5 different types of requests they could file. I think one of the most interesting will be the transition briefing materials. These are basically the briefing and report materials that federal agencies are expected to put together to brief the new presidential team as they're onboarding into the new administration. there's other interesting things there, security clearances.
Well, yeah, see,
Um,
look, I signed up for two. And this one's talking about the presidential transition, about documents that are going to be requested.
um,
That this probably ain't supposed to be listening to.
sorry, it took me a second to meet that person. Um, Cheryl, I appreciate your excitement, but you are unmuted, so I muted you for now. You can always unmute yourself later. Um, so the presidential transition documents, that is a great place to start. You could go through this guide, find some interesting things to request. That'll be especially pertinent in the next few months. What else do I have here? Yeah, I talked about this uh, last time in our last FOIA Friday when we did the 50 FOIAs in 50 minutes. This guy, Patrick Maynard, has been filing requests for rosters of forms from police agencies around the country for the last several years and then posting those all in this GitHub. And he's accumulated a lot of states and a lot of police agencies worth of forms. So if you're interested in police-specific public records, I would go check this out. For example, here you can see this is from a Buffalo Police Department. Oops, that's not, there we go. Um, that's not great either. Let's see. I'm going to find a good example. Um, let's see. This is what a roster of forms will look like. You can see here for Delaware, I think this is Delaware State Police, all these different documents and forms that are produced just in the daily work of this police agency. So go through those, check those out. That'd be a good place to start. You can request your own FBI file. Um, who knows if their FBI has been keeping tabs on you for any way, for any reason, or in any way. But that's something that I think is a popular request among FOIA requesters or Muckrock's FOIA requesters. Um, yeah, and then just in general, think about a topic you care about, then a government agency who interacts with that topic, and try to imagine a day in the life of that employee and the person that works for that agency. What information do they record about all that they do? That should lead you to a good place to start in requesting something that's about a topic or an agency that you really care about. And share your work with me in Muckrock Slack, on this call, with friends and family, and anyone who will listen. A fun part about getting started in public records is just telling people what you're digging into and what you found. Question number two, how can I get Brady material in California? This is also something that I mentioned in our 50 FOIAs in 50 minutes call. Brady material is any evidence that would draw into question the police who are testifying in a trial and their ability to testify honestly or accurately about the thing at hand. So it's actually very good timing for someone to ask about this. I promise I did not write this question myself. Last week, Muckrock launched a project to collect Brady materials across the country. We've been working with New York Focus and a team of reporters on organizing and analyzing a bunch of these documents in New York. And it's produced a lot of really great reporting about the types of misconduct that almost no one in New York has had access to before we started requesting these Brady materials. So if you're interested in Brady materials, check out this guide that talks a little bit about what they are and why we're filing these requests. And you can fill out this assignment and tell us what other police agencies we should file to. Um, yeah, and then just in general, if you're filing that request on your own right now, I would phrase it not just as a Brady list, but as any materials related to Brady or Giglio or regarding potential impeachment and disclosure obligations. That's basically the legal language for why they have to provide these things in court. Um, Someone submitted a question asking for updates and what reasonable timelines look like. Um, this is actually something I think I'm going to write about a little bit more in the new year or try to start working on before the end of the year. A lot of people recently have asked about ongoing investigations, how to deal with that response, or when a officer gets back to you and says they just don't have the resources right now to fulfill your request in a more prompt way, or you're just not getting responses that show that the officer is really following the guidelines of your state law, maybe. And I think, yeah, I think this is something I'm going to work a little bit more on and try to put some more collected and concentrated thoughts together. But my first thoughts are FOIA and state public records laws are really there to create legal guidelines. That's the great part of them is great part about them is that it's just not that you're asking for something like you would ask a friend to like bring, I don't know, your water bottle back because you left it at their house. That's happened to me before, and it takes my friend like 3 weeks to get me that water bottle unless I literally go to their house and get it back from them. Um, there are legal guidelines. It's not just that you're asking it for them on any timeline they can, and they can say no. So keep those guidelines in mind. That's those guardrails are there to keep your interaction within like this kind of specific in these specific guardrails. So it's supposed to happen in a way that is different than if you were just asking for anything from a public agency. So these legal guardrails give you timelines often for when that agency is supposed to respond with an initial response and then an estimated completion date. And I think always bringing that officer back to those timelines is helpful. So definitely look and know your completion dates and timelines for how agencies respond in your state. Even if you don't really have clear timelines beyond maybe that initial response, just continue to ask about those and reference the state public records law and say, hey, this is what the law says. Call and nudge often. Of course, being gentle. You don't always need to be gentle, but I think most of the time, as they say, the actually I don't can't even remember the phrase, the honey and bees phrase. AJ, do you know what I'm talking about?
You get more with honey than you do vinegar or something, something to that.
Exactly. I knew I had to call on someone. Yeah, exactly. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Yeah, exactly. So be gentle. Ask if you can receive a rolling response or if you need to narrow the request, if you need the document sooner. Don't be afraid to appeal if they continue to miss their own deadlines and don't show any clear effort to take that seriously. So those are just a few things you can do. Again, I think I'm going to take a closer look at this and write some more thoughts up because there are a lot of ways that your request can get held up, and that often just leads you to give up on that request and move on to something different. Um, Okay, now moving into some more specific ones. My question is, at what point do you give up, and at what point should you, and what you should do if you are denied the information at all and there's no means to get it? Actually, this is more of a general one before the few specific ones we have. So in general, giving up early is not a bad thing, as long as you appeal. This is kind of something I've been telling myself recently. Um, you are not necessarily giving up as long as you appeal. You should always appeal. And uh when you should give up an appeal depends on how your interactions have been going up to that point. But I wrote out a basic list, and you should appeal if your request was rejected, and you went back to the officer and made your point that the exemption given to you doesn't apply in the way that they argued. You should appeal if your request never got a response. This is called a constructive denial, and that is actually a type of a denial. It's not just that you have to keep calling and trying to get them to respond to you. That's already a point at which you can appeal. You can appeal your fee assessment if that was astronomical, or if you weren't given a waiver and you are a journalist and should have a waiver. Or again, if your officer stopped responding to you and doesn't seem like they're making a good faith effort to follow the law and the timelines, you can appeal. So my answer to this question is that you should only give up after an administrative appeal. Maybe if you don't have the money to then money or resources or connections or the know-how to make that appeal, take that appeal a step up from an administrative to a legal appeal. And that is also something I'm thinking I will write about and then do a FOIA Friday on in the coming months. And that is how to file your own lawsuit for public records. So we're gonna have like a DIY litigation guide, and hopefully that will help for anyone who's already filed an administrative appeal and is like, well, what next? Is this the time that I give up? But yeah, again, feel free to give up on the initial part of the FOIA request if it's meant these circumstances and just move on to an appeal because, again, you can't spend forever waiting for an agency to start working in good faith or get to the bottom of something when they haven't. Um, yeah, check out FOIA Friday, our FOIA Friday session on appeals and the resources in that call's tip sheet. And I'm going to move on to two specific questions I've got. I don't know if the folks who asked these questions originally were on this call. I do know them by name, but I'll probably follow them up with them afterwards. So someone asked about pesticides and how to figure out what pesticides and chemicals are being sprayed in this Milwaukee County park. I think this is a great question, a great, very specific question. Um, there are a lot of permits created in an environmental regulation. This is a very FOIA-able or requestable area of government. And I linked in this response to the type of permit that you have to file when you are using pesticides in Pennsylvania. And if you are someone who applies pesticides in Pennsylvania, you also have to be certified and permitted to do that in Pennsylvania, at least. So the place that I would start with that is all pesticide permit applications for or whatever the type of form, that technical form name is, submitted for application in a given county, your county you're interested in for specific dates. Someone also asked on our last call about investigating a prosecutor. The place that I would start with that is by calling your local prosecuting office and seeing if they have a training manual on prosecutorial misconduct, so what they classify as misconduct or errors in prosecution. And that would be a great public records request to start with. So to request that manual, so when you're looking into what you think or have heard could be prosecutorial misconduct, you have them describing it in their own language. Yeah, you'll want to regularly check the appellate court opinions on the jurisdiction you're covering, because that's where you're going to start to find the things that you will want to look into and compare to the handbook that you have. I would check out this guide that I dropped in the notes as well on lots of different court records you can find by state and where to find those. That should give you a good place to start, even if you're not using Nexus or Westlaw. You're going to be spending a lot of time reviewing those appeals and leaning on legal research and maybe even textbooks. So it seems like something that is, like a lot of things, really, really important to look into, but will require a lot of labor in comparing what you see in the appeals to what you see as prosecutorial misconduct in either your expert interviews or your guidebooks, and then making note of all of that. And at the end here, I left a few links to some good investigations and then a book about prosecutorial misconduct. That would be a good place to start. And I am now through those mailbag questions and at 1:21, 1 minute over, and I'm gonna pass it over to AJ.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate this opportunity today. Um, let's get to it. Can everyone see the presentation?
Now I can. Almost couldn't, but now I can.
Okay. I know there's a slight delay, so let me know through the chat if I'm going too fast or too slow. All right, so I'm AJ Johnson. My My company is Johnson Consulting Services. Today I'm here with Muck Rock and you for the FOIA Friday series. And my screen sharing is not working. Just 1 second. Okay, I see it now. There we go. Today is Friday, November 15th. All right. So our agenda today, I'll be talking to you a little bit about Detroit documenters. We'll go through a little bit of legislation and then get right to an analysis that connects the dots in terms of the state of policing in Detroit, Michigan. And then we'll look at the state of FOIA through the lens of the DPD, the Detroit Police Department. So who are the Detroit documenters? Well, the documenters work with the 9 local newsrooms in Detroit. They're listed on the right. But Outlier Media and the Detroit Documenters, well, the Detroit Documenters Network is powered by Outlier Media. And we are, as documenters, a nationwide network of over 20 cities in 14 states. This is democratic participation of engaged citizens, community and civic organizations who report out regional, state, county, and city government. These public meetings include arts, elections, housing, transportation, utilities, and more. So it's a network of people committed to participatory civic media. The websites are listed here on the right, www.outliermedia.org or detroit.documenters.org. So be sure, if you're in Detroit or Michigan, to subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts. And this week's newsletter is provided in the link. And this week, we've talked to Detroiters about their opinions on the election results, amongst other public meetings that we cover. So, legislation. So before we get into legislation, know that the city of Detroit covers 139 square miles. The city is broken up into 7 districts that you see here. And I'll be going through first the 2012 city charter excerpts related to the police department. The board that I'll be discussing, they are assigned by district. So the 2012 city charter is our latest government document that describes the composition and responsibilities of all government, but of the police department and our civilian-led oversight board of police commissioners. Have to keep remembering to hit this button here. So within the Board of Police Commissioner lies the Office of Chief Investigator, the OCI. They handle the intake and processing of all citizen complaints. Here I provided 3 links to our Michigan Freedom of Information Act. The first is the online link, the second a PDF, and the third a handbook. The handbook is particularly useful because it's published by our state's Attorney General, and it is filled with examples of how FOIA is applied throughout the state, and also their opinions and that of court decisions regarding FOIA requests. So this is our Freedom of Information Act. Dylan, can you tell me how to remove the top band that goes across? It's kind of blocking where I can't see, but I believe it's Act 442 of 1976. So it is the public policy of our state that all persons, except those incarcerated, are entitled to full and complete information regarding the affairs of government and the official acts of those who represent them as public officials and public employees. The people shall be informed so that they may fully participate in the democratic process. And this pretty much follows the federal FOIA Act in intent. So the Freedom of Information Act contains several sections. These are the key sections that are of importance to those filing FOIA requests. Obviously, there are fees and limitations on those fees, which is important to know. There is the mandatory 5 business day response for any FOIA request. There is a FOIA coordinator at each of these public bodies. There's an appeals process, and also there are outcomes or for failure to comply. And then there are multiple exemptions in Section 15243. I believe there are 26 in Michigan. So to file a FOIA request to the police department, there are 4 methods: the online portal, an email, a fax, which I don't know who's using a fax in 2024, but also the walk-in at KMAC. And KMAC is the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center, named after our first Black mayor, Coleman Young. And that's in room 500. So policing in Detroit, Michigan. Policing in Detroit, Michigan has been plagued for decades by widespread corruption and police misconduct, or what I call kick the can. The purpose, allegedly, of the department is to keep our neighborhoods safe. While the Board of Police Commissioners was tasked with oversight of the police department by recording and investigating complaints against members of the police department by the citizens of Detroit. The police department uses directives to guide their interactions with citizens. These are a list of Detroit Police Department directives, and those that are highlighted are those that will be talked about throughout this presentation. It's important to note that the discipline directive does not mention the Oversight Board of Police Commissioners tasked with misconduct or discipline matters. So this is from the Discipline Directive 1024. And as you can see, it may end in an appeal. This is the Fourth Amendment that says no warrants shall be made without probable cause, and the 14th Amendment that says all persons in any state may not deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. It's important to keep that in mind. Hold on, something is missing. Just 1 second. Okay. Go back. Sorry. Yep. Just one moment. Trying to go back, but what we're on right now is let's see which, we're looking at 3 reports. This report that we're looking at is the MVU report, and I'm trying to go back to it, and it's not allowing me. But within this report, which came out in November 2021, the FBI agents, along with internal affairs at the Detroit Police Department, Michigan State Police, and the Attorney General, investigated the MVU unit, or the Drug Enforcement Unit of the Detroit Police Department. They found that search warrant and affidavit files had not been process served, and some had been sitting in drawers for years. And in one case, a person had been unaware that charges had been filed against them for over 3 years. These search warrant affidavit files that were not process served are actually Detroit citizens who have been deprived of their constitutional rights. It looks like I'm stuck in a form. Okay, there we go. All right, we're on the second report. There are 3 reports, by the way. So that was the first one. The second report is from our Office of Inspector General. That's report 23-005-INV, the unauthorized OCI closures. This report came out February 29th of this year, and you can read more about it through an Outlier Media report that came out basically the next day. The findings of this report at the OIG were abysmal. They found that the Office of Chief Investigator's bylaws and city charter were non-compliant. They also found that the organization chart, city charter, and the Michigan Open Meetings Act were non-compliant. They found that the standard operating procedures, or SOP, in the city charter were non-compliant. And finally, the Office of Chief Investigator was asked to review citizen complaints, that is, backlogged and current, that were unauthorized to be triaged or grouped together and administratively closed to ensure that they are resolved in accordance with our city charter. Now, we don't yet know the result of that request, but you can read more here from our partners at Metro Times in this article below. That particular report had real-world consequences. Our partners at Metro Times reported about the lawsuit that was filed. It turns out that the Board of Police Commissioner's secretary administratively closed over 250 citizen complaints. She complained in the lawsuit that some police commissioners and staff members were obstructing her progress on the backlog. And she filed the suit because she was fired. She said that the software allowed city officials to monitor her work. So the Duggan mayoral administration should have been able to identify the saboteurs. And now the third report. The third report more than makes up for the lack of pages with the depth of the findings. This was the Improving and Expanding Police Accountability Report. It's an undated report with no pagination or table of contents. My best guess is it came out sometime in October 2021, but that's just my best guess based on the link name. It's 8 pages in total, including the cover, and you can read more about it through Outlier Media's article here at the bottom of the page. This report was shocking. For instance, they said that the metrics that the police department reports to the Board of Police Commissioners should be uniform for tracking the misconduct of officers. They talked about the separation of citizen complaints into allegations, which is problematic because allegations is a term used by the prosecution in criminal matters. So the public is charged with crimes that must be proven in a court of law and are not provided the same legal courtesy of being given the benefit of the doubt with the presumption of innocence like the police are provided. As currently constructed, an officer could beat someone, rob them, talk to them disrespectfully, spray them with chemical spray, but this would only be counted as a single complaint, when each of the actions should be counted as 4 separate complaints or 4 instances of misconduct. Also, the Office of Chief Investigator does not yet publicly define administrative closures such as innocence of charge, which should be automatically provided to the complainant after success in a court of law. The public is largely unaware that this closure exists for those who win in court. In fact, I have never seen this particular administrative closure because it's not listed on the city website at all and has not been discussed in any Board of Police Commissioner meeting to date. Thus, all citizen complaints are seriously undercounted when several complaints of police misconduct are grouped or triaged into a single complaint, which undermines the actual count and contributes to an even larger than publicly reported backlog. So finally, the state of FOIA as it pertains through the lens of the Detroit Police Department. Basically, these FOIAs go into a black hole. That black hole right there. So Outlier Media's investigation through a FOIA request found that over 260 citizen complaints were mishandled, again, by the secretary at the oversight board for the police. This was 4 months prior to the OIG investigation and was likely why there was an investigation to begin with. The Detroit Board of Police Commissioners keeps a list of problem officers, but that information is not made public, and it's not tied to districts. Commissioners are elected and appointed by district, but without commissioners tied to officer misconduct by district, there will be no accountability for the citizens of Detroit. Lots of requests made by the board and to the board are promised at a later date, but that means the information is private, not made public. So these are non-transparent actions withheld from the citizens of Detroit. So fact check. I'm giving you actual police report numbers and FOIA request numbers so you can do your own research. So FOIA request A18-07173 resulted in 2 police reports. So the first question is, did the police provide the prosecutor's office with the first police report number with any accompanying documentation? And if not, why not? And what percentage or number of Detroit citizens are provided an innocence of charge disposition when false allegations are made and there is success in court? Why wasn't a Detroit citizen provided the innocence of charge after success in court? Because 2 different police report narratives cannot both be truthful. So it looks like this citizen was also provided multiple police clearances over a 3-year period when there was a hidden and or false warrant for their arrest. In November 2023, our partners at Detroit Metro Times brought a FOIA lawsuit to bear after a failed records request for police records at the Michigan State Police identified in the Michigan Freedom of Information Act. The lawsuit affirmed that our Michigan Supreme Court has emphasized FOIA is pro-disclosure, which means all public bodies must disclose public records not specifically exempted by FOIA. In this same FOIA request, these are the responses from that request. And basically, they tell 2 different stories. In both instances from the police report, the person is described as a victim where there was an assault, but the assault is not mentioned in one report. Molestation was mentioned in one report and not in the other. It just doesn't match. The stories don't make any sense. So follow up. In the original police report, why wasn't the person who called the police questioned when officers arrived? Why are there 2 different narratives surrounding a single incident? What evidence shows that any warrant or affidavit was executed upon the citizen? And what constitutional rights are violated when no warrant is executed? And why would the police repeatedly give the citizen police clearances knowing that a warrant was issued? And why would a person going to see their dying mother in hospice steal hospital records and call the police? Just make it make sense. This is yet another FOIA request to the City of Detroit Police Department. In the request, they request any and all records, video, audio, electronic, and paper, to justify police presence on private property arriving unannounced and uninvited. Police respond that the city will incur a cost in the amount of $415.35, and they request a deposit of 1/2 that amount. They emphasize they do not accept cash. There were some back and forth emails in which the responder says this FOIA request and the appeal have both exceeded time periods specified in the Michigan FOIA law. The city does make use of an attorney contractor who is listed in the bottom left of the screen. He does not meet in person, and you really can't reach him by phone. We haven't been paid yet is a violation of the Michigan Freedom of Information Act. This is a denial, the one that Dylan spoke of earlier, I believe is called constructive denial, where there was an appeal made to the head of the public body. And this is directly from the FOIA law, so I just dropped it here. Within 10 business days, they should do one of the following: either waive the fee, reduce the fee, or uphold the fee. They done none of the above. So the final nail in the coffin in terms of policing in Detroit, Michigan, as it pertains to FOIA. Police records have been found to be unreliable and filled with false information. From the MVU report, or Operation Clean Sweep, they found, quote, false sworn statements and lies, end quote, in police reports. Officers were able to determine the validity of their very own probable cause, and officers, quote, intentionally and purposefully, end quote, engaged in misconduct. Second, the Board of Police Commissioners does not have the respect of the police department, and the department does not provide required reports to them or to the public. The majority of meetings take place at police headquarters. Detroit documenters found that the police department fails to provide required reports to the commissioners in violation of police directives. So, for instance, the 3078 gunshot detection policy, there was a violation in a Board of Police Commissioners meeting. And there are other examples, but I didn't want to fill the page. Detroit documenters also found that hosting board meetings at police headquarters has a chilling effect that impacts public participation, both the comments and complaints. So there's a meeting link for that. May also violate the Open Meetings Act, and a single commissioner did echo that sentiment, because the members of the public are subject to body scans and must produce photo ID. But the Open Meetings Act mandates that providing a name or other information is not a necessary condition to attend a public meeting. And there was more concern with payments than adherence to the FOIA. Today, officials are actively and purposefully denying the FOIA request and ignoring the appeal while simultaneously requesting payment. The MVU corruption report said that police officers took prosecutorial authority unto themselves. This is absent any prosecutor participation or approval, and became the sole decision-making authority as to which victims, that is, Detroiters, would be prosecuted. And DET, our partners, reported that 32 months after Operation Clean Sweep, which was the investigation of a department within the police department, found that no charges had been filed. And to date, I don't believe any charges have been filed, and that was in June 2022. So I noticed that Muck Rock just put out this information. They're filing public record requests to district attorneys for information gathered on police misconduct, and I am formally requesting that assistance. So any and all help is appreciated. You may contact me through Detroit Documenters and Outlier Media or through Dylan here at Muckrock. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, AJ. That was awesome. It's really great to hear about your work and all the work that Detroit Documenters do. I'm just going to open it up now to questions. Questions for AJ, questions for me about uh, police misconduct, about complaints, about documenters in Detroit, or about anything else, any other random FOIA questions. We'll probably prioritize the first few questions related to anything that AJ was talking about or just police and police misconduct in general. But we can close out with any broader questions or updates from anyone if anyone's has any requests they filed recently that they want to talk through or yeah, just get the group's ideas on. I'll keep an eye on the chat to see when those questions come in. But I guess to start, AJ, I'm really interested in, at one point you had mentioned the 260 complaints that were mishandled. Can you talk
Correct.
about more about what was found to have been mishandled or how they were mishandled?
Sure. That was when the slideshow cut out on me. So that was the Office of Inspector General report. And what documenters had found 4 months prior was the board secretary, who has no authorization per the city charter. She closed out citizen complaints, which is highly, if nothing else, unethical.
So she just closed those out in like
Yeah,
a fell swoop
in a
without,
fell swoop.
yeah, without it
There
actually doing
was no, to my knowledge, there was no contact made with those citizens who made those complaints. So that prompted an inspector general investigation. Yeah.
Uh, Still no questions, so I'm gonna ask you another question. Uh,
Okay.
I know you've worked in government offices, and now you've produced documents as a response to FOIA requests, or you worked in and around FOIA for a long time, and now you are a requester yourself, kind of in this different role.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about the difference from being on one side of the FOIA request to the other.
Ooh, okay. So I started in the community fulfilling requests. I just followed the lead of our community expert. I didn't really know anything about the law. I was just doing what I was told. That was 20 years ago. After that, I worked at a nonprofit, and there were a lot of breaches, a lot of data breaches in terms of at the hospitals. As you know, recently the casinos had a lot of breaches here in Wayne County. There was a breach, a ransomware breach a few months ago now, and our county website was down. So breaches are a big deal, but we need to know if the citizens of the communities that are involved were notified. So it actually brought about notification laws because they didn't exist at the time we were doing it. So I wrote to state's attorney general's office to get information on whether or not the citizens of the state were being notified of these breaches. After that, I worked for the federal government, and we did FOIA officer or CIO and high level agency official interviews because we reported out to the Congress. So um, the FOIA work, in my case, has been all over from local to federal. So I've just seen every every aspect of it, unfortunately or fortunately.
Yeah, and we were just talking about this a little bit before the call when you were talking about the data breaches and privacy impact assessments and SORNs. That's
Mhm.
kind of something now I've been interested in. Muckrock published a couple weeks ago
Right,
an article about AI and FOIA and how federal agencies are using AI
right.
potentially to process requests or redact requests in different
Yeah.
ways. And
They have a bunch of different databases, and what we found doing FOIA requests across the government was the systems don't talk to each other. There was a time when Department of Justice did all FOIA requests, but NARA eventually, or National Archives, eventually took over and became the FOIA ombudsman. So they handle mediation, FOIA mediation, which is a needed thing at the federal level for sure, because no one wants to go to court.
yeah, definitely. And in Pennsylvania, we have a great mediation agency as well. And
Mhm.
I think it's relatively recently, maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, I think that this agency took over mediation. And
Mhm.
I know it's just such a huge resource.
Yeah,
We do have one
definitely.
question in the chat from Laura. Laura asks, what's your process when you want to find a police policy or directive? Where do you get them from?
City website. City website. Go to, okay, I'll tell you. Um, you go to the City of Detroit website, which is detroitmi.gov. You navigate over to the police department. At the bottom of the page, it'll say more or something to that effect. And you type in directives. I think you put type in DPD directives. And if you need a list, I have a list. I can just give it to you. But all the directives are on the city website.
I imagine though it also helps that you're there at different types of police and board meetings as a documenter, right?
Yes, yes. And I've documented all of our tweets that date back to 2019. I believe we've documented the first instance of them holding the meetings at police headquarters, which to me is a real great disservice to the citizens of Detroit. We documented folks that have told us that they've been turned away, they didn't have ID or whatever. Um, it's a little, like I said, there's a chilling effect just in terms of the comments. You have to be pretty brave to get up there and speak. Let me see what Laura has. Let me see if that's it. I'm going to look right now. Mhm.
And as Alina,
But they're
oh,
broken
sorry.
off into section 100, 200, and 300. Um, yeah, more documents at the bottom of the page. And then you type in directives and you'll see a whole list. But there's a list if you click directives right there, you'll get the 200s. It looks like they're listed now from that link you gave me.
Well, it's 2:01. I think it's about time to wrap up, unless there are any last minute questions anyone wants to drop in. Our next FOIA Friday is, I think, also December 15th or right around there. It's not the last Friday of the
Okay.
month, but we're trying to beat the holidays with these November and December FOIA Fridays, and then we'll get back on schedule in January with the last Friday of every month. I don't have the schedule for that FOIA Friday planned yet. I think we may also have a guest speaker for that FOIA Friday. I'm hoping there is a professor who has written a book called The Rise of Right to Know about the history of public records and how that coincides with different cultural things happening in the American psyche and understanding about what the public should know about consumer products, but also about their government. It's a great book, and it will be an interesting conversation. I'm trying to wrangle him to get him on here. But if you have any other suggestions or ideas, as always, put that in the form or email me directly at dylan@muckrock.com. And yeah, again, thank you so much, AJ, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.